This is Dr. Karmen Smith, and thank you for joining Center for Spiritual Living of Greater Las Vegas. Today, I want to introduce you to the theme of the month of December, which is preparing the way for Christ consciousness. And one of the major things that we need to do and be aware of when we prepare the way for Christ consciousness is the shadow. And my theme and my title for this morning's service is Welcoming the Shadow. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I welcome the shadow? Because if you were born, and I think I'm aging myself, in the 50s or 60s, and you remember a TV show that was like, ooh, the shadow knows, and there's all this suspense and maybe even a little bit of fear attached to a shadow. And maybe when we're in the dark, which maybe the shadow represents to some people, that can be scary. So first of all, I want to clarify, what is the shadow? The shadow is our fragmented self. What does that mean? That means that we come onto the planet as a whole being, infused with the attributes of God. And oftentimes in our childhood, we experience trauma, and that can be trauma can be in a spectrum. It can be many things to different people. But basically when your attributes are tapped down by someone, in other words, you're a child and you want to do art and you're doing finger painting and you're having a great time, and then somebody criticizes your art and says, oh, you're not an artist, oh, that doesn't look good, or maybe they didn't give you attention for your art. So one of the things that we do in our shadow is that we tamp that down and we say, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, and that shows up later in our life where we don't believe that we have the attributes of God within us because of something somebody said. So how else does that show up? It shows up when we judge other people for being creative. We judge other people for having the attributes of God. So you can see the shadow can have positive and seemingly negative attributes attached to it. When we tamp down our attributes of God that we naturally come into the world with, we criticize and judge other people for being brilliant, for being fabulous, for being all their true self. We even criticize people for being loving and call that weakness. Why? Because we've tamped it down. And in our shadow, it's everything that we don't accept and we don't embrace about ourselves. So the shadow, look at it as positive, seemingly negative, but it's all the things that we have not accepted or embraced about ourselves. And one of those is our God attributes. Now there can be other things. Like say we've been told that we're not good enough, or that we're bad because we think a certain way. That can also show up as our shadow self. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can identify your shadow. Because remember, the theme this month is preparing the way for Christ consciousness. And most people don't even know they have a shadow because it's hidden. This is in the subconscious realm of our consciousness. In other words, we're not aware of it. So bringing it to our awareness, and also when we do bring it to our awareness, we need to accept it and embrace it. So how can you tell if you have a hidden shadow? When you're triggered by something that's going on, a family member said this, or you saw this in the news, or somebody you feel is doing something to you. This is a trigger. And you can go deeper into that trigger with contemplation and introspection by journaling and also by asking certain questions. Here's the main one. What am I afraid of? Your fear, once you identify it, will always lead you back to your shadow. I'll give you an example. If you have grown up in an environment where you didn't feel safe to love, and you didn't really know what love meant, maybe love had conditions on it. If you act this way, I'll love you, or I'll treat you better. If you say this or think this way, I might like you. So there are conditions to love. So if you grow up like that, you learn that love has conditions. And so as you become an adult, you put conditions on people. Well, I can't love you if you do this. If you think differently, then I have conditions and I judge you that way. And so you crust over your heart. Now your heart chakra is the one thing that accepts your shadow. So if you crust that over and you say, well, I'm not going to accept another person, and I'm not going to accept those parts of me that want to love, I'm not going to accept that because I've learned that there are conditions to love. And so when you're in relationship as an adult, you'll have all these conditions. And when that person doesn't meet those conditions, well, I can't love you, you're out the door. And you're not good enough. And so you crust over the very thing that can heal you and that relationship. So the shadow keeps us in our mind. It says, if you don't do this, then I can't do that. It's conditional. But when you drop those painful places from your childhood into your heart, what you're doing is you're allowing God resides in our heart and does its most beautiful work through our heart chakra. So when we drop that mind of unacceptance and we look at ourselves and all the places where we are afraid and we haven't accepted ourselves, we drop it into the heart chakra, and the heart chakra has to do with compassion. Yes, we see the wrong, we see the right, but we go straight to love. When you're able to do that with your shadow, the things that you haven't accepted and the things you haven't embraced about yourself, when you drop it into the heart chakra, oh, you're able to give yourself a hug. You're able to see those areas within yourself that have developed patterns of dysfunction in relationships. And you're able to say, oh, I see where that came from. I had been tapped down. I had been taught that love was conditional. And I incorporated that into myself, but I never saw it before. Your heart allows you to be expansive in your view. So whereas before, it was your shadow, you weren't aware of it, but now you're aware. I see it. I see how it formed. I have compassion for those who tamped me down, because they were tapped down too. But now I have more room for the attributes of God. And I recognize that I can embrace all of them, and I don't have anything blocking me from the love of God. Our shadow blocks us. And another way of saying it is it crusts over your heart. Another way of saying it is that you're so addicted to looking outside of yourself, criticizing other people for being fabulous, criticizing other people for showing that they have conditions on their love, when actually exactly what you're criticizing somebody else about is pointing you towards what needs to be healed within yourself. But in order to heal it, you have to be aware of it. So when you're triggered and you find your anger or resentment or jealousy bubbling to the surface, this is the universe pointing you in the direction of your shadow. What are you afraid of? Now, as a mental health therapist, I tell people, to journal about what their fears are. I wrote a book about the human hamster wheel. It's called The I Am Solution, and that is a fear-based energy that when you see certain behaviors like blame, criticism, judgment, addiction, all of these things are covering over what you're most fearful of. And instead of just spinning around in that hamster wheel of behavioral fear, you go within and you say, what is this fear? What have I not accepted? What have I not seen? What am I not being aware of? Or what am I pushing down myself that needs to come forth so that I can prepare for the Christ consciousness? What is blocking me from my love? And this is where deep self-love begins. Because once you see what you didn't want to see before, you bring it down into your heart chakra and you say, I love myself. I see myself. I embrace myself. And once you have a practice of doing that, and once again, this is not a lightning bolt experience. This is an ongoing practice of getting triggered and going within and finding out, wait a minute, where is my fear? And where can I drop it down into compassion towards myself? Now, once you do that and you have a practice of self-love, you become more full, more whole in the source, the divine attributes that we came in with, which are compassion, creativity, love, gratitude, and you trust. Because some people say the opposite of fear is love. It's also trust. Trusting that the source within you, that is in all things, that envelops and embraces all things, is also the path that is safe. That is the path where you're not alone. It is the path of love and the path of abundance, and you trust it. And so you begin to replace your fear with peace, with trust, with knowing that you are whole and complete. And so you can see how you're always working or always practicing that fragmented part to be whole, and 24/7 to be in the source stream of wholeness. And you are not fragmented anymore because you are enveloped and embracing all of you. Let me say that again. Because you are embracing all of you. And people might be looking at this going, well, I'm not perfect. How does this work? And it reminds me of what Jesus said. People were calling him good. He said, don't call me good. It's the Father within me. It is that spirit within me that is always guiding those attributes and getting me right back into wholeness. And that takes practice. I'd also like to remind you that when you see in the world fear, this can be a shadow. So there is a collective shadow, and there's also shadows with countries. And so America has a shadow. It has something that it is not accepted, and it has something that it is not embraced. And so this needs to be looked at. You're aware of it, and you drop it down into the heart chakra of empathy, compassion, love, understanding. And this is what heals. Does it heal in a lightning bolt situation where, oh yeah, I got it and now I'm great? It's something that you're aware of and you embrace as a practice. And this is where individual transformation is so key. Because as we become self-loving beings, we vibrate that out to our family, to our neighbors, and it vibrates out to the collective consciousness. And that is how you become an alchemist, is that you alchemize this energy of fear and you turn it into compassionate self-love to the collective. And that's how you transform and transmute the collective. And once again, the collective is the country, is the globe. And this is what is happening. We're seeing people that have been confined due to COVID. And when you're confined and you have very little distractions, you have to go inside of yourself. And so the whole globe is looking at their shadow. And it's okay to do that. And sometimes when you go inside of there, it can be a little disconcerting because you haven't looked within yourself to find out, do you have hatred? Do you have implicit bias? Do you have trauma areas? And have you neglected and not accepted that you can have God qualities and still be walking on this planet? A lot of people are waking up. They're waking up to their true power, their true nature that's been tamped down. You'll see women rising up into their feminine power. You'll see men recognizing that they had a shadow. You'll see all kinds of people waking up, and you'll see children coming onto the planet that cannot be tamped down. And they will rise up without a shadow. So there are many things happening on this planet right now. It's a very exciting time to be alive because we are all evolving into higher and higher vibrational beings. Let's take a deep breath. Let's take it all in, because there's a lot to unpack there, and you have time to go within. You have permission to go within, and all of the energies and planets are aligning right now so that you can address the shadow, the fragmented self, and we are all working towards wholeness. That's the good news. So welcome to the evolution.